It was early November of 2007 when I first encountered a series of therapy sessions that made me question everything I thought I knew about the world. As a child psychologist in Maine, I was used to unsettling stories, but this was different. It all began with one young patient who was a quiet boy with a troubled mind. During our sessions, he started to talk about a peculiar friend who he called Mr. Smile. At first I thought it was just another imaginary figure that his overactive mind had conjured to cope with his struggles. His parents thought the same. He described Mr. Smile with a mix of fear and awe. I could see his small hands tremble as he talked about him. The name came from the unshakable grin this figure supposedly wore. The boy said that when Mr. Smile appeared, everything in the room felt different. He described it as a kind of heavy happiness that made the hairs on his neck stand up. He told me it felt like all his anger and sadness disappeared when Mr. Smile was near, but the calm that remained was anything but peaceful. It was the kind of calm that made his skin crawl. The boy insisted that Mr. Smile never spoke. He only stood there watching. He was always at the foot of the boy's bed, filling the air with a sickly sweet smell like cotton candy left out too long. The boy claimed he felt safe when Mr. Smile was there, but his darting eyes told me a different story. At first I dismissed Mr. Smile as a coping mechanism that the boy used to deal with the turmoil in his home. I thought it might explain his violent outbursts and his restless energy. But then another patient, who was a 9-year-old girl, began mentioning her own friend. She called him Mr. Smile too. Soon after, a 7-year-old boy described him. Then a 12-year-old boy. Then an 11-year-old girl. Within weeks, nearly 15 of my young patients were talking about the same figure. They all described him the same way. He had the same grin, the same candy-like smell, and the same suffocating sense of forced happiness. I tried to rationalize it. Children have vivid imaginations, and sometimes they invent similar stories. The name Mr. Smile seemed generic enough to be a coincidence. But as more children shared their accounts, I felt my unease grow. I started to ask them for more details, but every answer left me feeling like I was stepping further into a shadowy place where imagination and something far darker blurred together. The consistency in their stories was chilling. They all used the exact same words to describe him. They spoke of his grin, his scent, and his silent presence as if they had rehearsed it. But that was impossible. Many of these children hardly left their homes. 5 of them were homeschooled and rarely went anywhere but the grocery store with their parents. The children had no connection to one another. They had no opportunity to share their stories or coordinate their descriptions. Yet somehow they all spoke of Mr. Smile as if they had lived through the same haunting experience. My mind raced as I tried to piece everything together. There was no way this was just a coincidence. It led me to a conclusion I did not want to believe. Something or someone was behind this. Whatever it was had access to these children in ways I could not begin to understand. I spoke privately with each family. I chose my words carefully and avoided revealing too much. I explained that something alarming had come up in several sessions and suggested there could be a risk to their child's safety. The parents reluctantly agreed to let me contact the authorities as long as they were kept informed at every step. Within a week, the police began interviewing the children about their mysterious friend. They kept their questions simple. They asked the kids to describe what he looked like. They asked how he got into their homes. They asked what he did while he was there. But the answers were far from simple. The children insisted they could not describe Mr. Smile's appearance beyond his unsettling grin. They said he was not like us. That vague and chilling statement sent shivers through the investigators. None of the children could explain how he entered their homes. They only remembered waking up to find him already standing at the foot of their beds watching. Some of the children said they had heard him humming a lullaby. It was not in English, but in a soft tune that flowed through the room like a warm breeze. Despite the terror of his presence, the children all said the same thing. They claimed he made them feel safe. But it was not a comforting kind of safety. It was the kind that felt suffocating, like being wrapped too tightly in a blanket. By this point, none of us believed this was just a collective fantasy. Whoever or whatever Mr. Smile was, we were certain he was real. The police searched the area for any signs of a predator, but found no leads. The truth was becoming harder to ignore. This figure was entering these homes undetected. He left behind nothing but a sense of dread and the memory of his unrelenting grin. As a last resort, the police asked the children to draw Mr. Smile. Since they struggled to describe him in words, the investigators hoped their drawings might reveal something. Quietly, each child picked up a red crayon. Their small hands gripped it tightly. Then one by one they began to color. When they finished, every single piece of paper was the same. Each one showed a solid rectangle of crimson red. There was no face, no features, no figure. Just a field of red, like the memory of something too horrible to take shape. When asked about their drawings, the children all gave the same unsettling answer. They insisted that the crimson rectangles were perfect depictions of Mr. Smile. When the adults questioned them further, asking where his head or arms or legs were, the children grew defensive. Their little voices trembled with frustration as they repeated over and over that everything was there. That was him. That was what he looked like. When we pointed out that their drawings showed no person, only a page filled with red, the children became upset. Some of them even grew angry. It was as if being accused of lying struck a deep nerve. Their voices shook with indignation as they repeated that was him. That was exactly what he looked like. Following a strong gut instinct, I decided to conduct a simple test. I took one of the crimson pages and showed it to the children one at a time without telling them who had drawn it. I gave no hint about the source of the picture or that others had drawn something similar. Yet every single child identified it without hesitation. They all said the same thing. That is him. That is the man who stands at the foot of my bed. The parents, now gripped with fear, agreed to take more drastic measures. Cameras and baby monitors were set up in every child's room. Their glowing screens were watched with obsessive vigilance. Sleep became a luxury that few of us could afford. Night after night, the parents sat in silence with their eyes glued to the flickering feeds of their children sleeping peacefully in their beds. Days blurred together in an endless cycle of watching and waiting and listening. But nothing happened. No one entered or left the rooms. The only sounds were soft snores or an occasional word murmured in a dream. Mr. Smile never appeared. Not even a shadow moved out of place. After nearly 2 weeks of this endless surveillance, doubt began to creep in. Some parents started whispering about the possibility that this was all just some strange case of mass hysteria. Even I began to question whether I had overreacted. Other professionals joined in with more rational theories. Some called it a shared delusion. They said it was an unexplainable but harmless phenomenon that sometimes spreads among children. Others speculated that the idea of Mr. Smile could have come from a forgotten movie or television show that all the children might have seen. It seemed like a comforting explanation. Many parents clung to it as they tried to shake off their growing paranoia. But then, one night, one of the boys disappeared. His parents had gone to bed exhausted after weeks of sleepless nights. When they woke up, the house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. They rushed to his room with their hearts pounding only to find his bed empty. His sheets were tossed aside as if he had been pulled out of them. The window was still locked from the inside. The cameras were checked in a frantic rush, but they showed nothing unusual. One moment the boy was asleep. The next, he was gone. All that remained was the faint trace of that sickly sweet smell. It hung in the air like a cruel whisper. It smelled like cotton candy left to rot in the dark. The camera in his room had gone dead at exactly 2:03 in the morning. His mother, jolted awake by a sudden sense of dread, had rushed to check on him. She sprinted down the hallway in less than a minute, but when she burst into his room, it was already empty. The window was still locked from the inside. There was no sign of forced entry. He was just gone. The only thing out of place was the smell. That sweet cloying scent was heavy and unnatural. It lingered in the stillness like a warning. A search was launched immediately, but there was no trace of the boy. Neighbors reported nothing strange that night. No unusual sounds. No suspicious figures lurking outside. He had simply vanished. Less than a week later, another child disappeared in the same way. This time it was one of the girls who had spoken of Mr. Smile. Then another child vanished. And another. It kept happening until only 4 children remained. The remaining 4 children began to speak in quiet and almost reverent tones about how Mr. Smile and his friends were going to take them away. They talked about a place they called the Happy Place. It was where Mr. Smile lived with others like him. They called them the Smiling Men. The children said the Happy Place was beautiful. They claimed it was a paradise. They knew this because Mr. Smile had shown it to them. Not with words, but with images. One boy told me that Mr. Smile talked to them in their heads. He said that Mr. Smile showed them things. But over time their descriptions of the Happy Place started to change. What had once sounded wonderful became dark and terrifying. 2 of the children said they no longer wanted to go. One day a boy started screaming uncontrollably. He clutched his head and begged for the colors to stop. He kept shouting for someone to make it go away. He said it was too much and that it was horrible. Another child whispered to me with a trembling voice. She told me that Mr. Smile was saying bad things to her. She said she could not tell anyone what they were. She was afraid that if she did, her parents would know too. She said they would know everything. Desperate to find answers, I convinced one of the boys to write down what Mr. Smile was telling him. I promised him I would keep it a secret. The boy reluctantly agreed. He poured his thoughts into a small notebook. What he wrote down remains a mystery. Only I and the authorities have seen it. Whenever anyone asks about its contents, we fall silent. Our faces go pale, and we quickly change the subject. Things only got worse. The children stopped sleeping completely. Night after night, the security cameras captured them sitting upright in their beds. Their wide and glassy eyes stared at the wall. They stayed like that for hours without blinking or moving. Sedatives had no effect. One of the girls started carving intricate circular patterns into her skin with anything sharp she could find. 2 of the boys stopped speaking English entirely. Their words were replaced with a strange guttural language that no one could identify. Linguists and anthropologists were consulted, but no one could make sense of it. Whatever they were speaking, it did not come from this world. By the start of 2009, all 4 remaining children were gone. They vanished as mysteriously as the others had. They left behind no evidence, no clues, no leads. Their homes were searched from top to bottom. Surveillance footage was reviewed over and over. Not a single piece of information came to light. The children disappeared into thin air, just like the ones before them. To this day, none of the children have been found. No bodies, no suspects, no explanations. All that remains are unanswered questions and whispered rumors. And sometimes people claim they still catch a faint smell of cotton candy lingering in the air.